teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing you've heard a student say? I'm a little late. I had a student who was deathly afraid of using the bathroom because monsters who wanted to get her were in the vents. Turns out her dad used to abuse her in the bathroom. This absolutely broke my heart. I hope she was able to get out of that situation and get the support she needed. I mean, kind of. Her dad died. Mom took off and was on drugs. She was living with grandma, but they wound up homeless for a good long while. They eventually moved in with mom in another state. Haven't heard from her since then. She breaks my heart every time I think about her life. During my second year student teaching, a teaching unpaid internship, a student brought a few bags of heroin to school in his backpack. He pulled them out in the hallway to show his friends before recess. He said, "I brought treasure from home. My mom says it's worth more than me." The kids were oohing and dying. The most ducked up part is that the school expelled him. We didn't help him at all. I think about him still. 9 years later. Oh. This was a 8-year-old. Second grade. Public schools give up too easily. No child left behind. What bogus. I had a student tell me about his parents leaving salt around the house. Bizarre. But I didn't connect the dots until they were arrested. Turns out, that was cocaine. I was thinking Winchesters. I was thinking witches. Oh, so many. A kid came in upset, and we finally got out what the problem was. This mom told him that he caused her to miscarry because he was such a duck up. Another kid came to school acting off. By lunchtime, he finally told someone that his dad got arrested the night before. The dad made him take off his clothes and beat the shit out of him with an electrical cord. The kid ran outside into the streets of Detroit, naked. Thank God a nice older man found him, put him a blanket on him, and took him to the police. Dad got arrested, and of course CPS got involved. CPS was looking for a placement. Kid assumed he would stay with his aunt, dad's sister, but learned that wasn't possible because that guy wasn't his dad. So within a day, kid got shit beaten out of him. Found out his dad wasn't his real dad. Put into foster care. Kid said something like, "My whole life is over." He was 10. Paraprofessional in an elementary school. A kid looked at me and casually said, "My mom died Sunday. Her funeral is next week," and shrugged. That's the emotional numbness you get after the cry buckets run empty and you've said and thought everything 1,000 times over. While student teaching, had a student shout, "You guys wanna see the gun in my backpack?" He was trying to joke, but security was called and the intervention specialist kept all students away from the bag. My younger brother did that in Heathrow once, in front of 2 DFT officers with machine guns, with a regional accent that is often mistaken for Irish. Yeah. One of my students' parents were fighting. Dad left home then came back to talk. They went out to the car to fight, so the kids wouldn't hear. He shot and killed the mother then himself. The girl came to school the next day and just said, "I have nowhere else to go." Apostrophe. Good grief, that's heartbreaking. Coached elementary pet. Had a 9-year-old student call me an infested tampon sucker. More surprised than angry. At the time I was 23 and never heard an insult like that. I was teaching a high school jewelry/metal shop class and some students alerted me to one student trying to sneak out some of the metal files. When confronted, he said he wanted to use them to stab people in the halls. I had him removed permanently, to say the least. One of my students threatened to kill my dog while I was out walking her. This was after he had cussed me out, ripped up his work, and disturbed the class. It was his second day in class. Second and last day, or just second day? Just second day. He was back the next day and I had to teach him like normal. The one year I taught 5th grade, I overheard a boy talking to his friends about how they should corner a female student in the bathroom and gang rape her while someone stood watch at the door. A couple months later, he wrote a very graphic letter that was passed around class about how my giant boobs were the only reason he came to school and went into explicit detail of how he wanted to titty-duck me. This was 5th grade. He was 10. How on earth was he aware about gang rape and titty-ducking? Question mark, exclamation mark. Exclamation mark question mark? Question mark? I can't imagine what he was exposed to at home to have that kind of knowledge. I stick to the primary grades now, and I've heard some heartbreaking stories, but this one definitely sticks out as the most disturbing. My dad wants to kill me with his hunting gun. 9 years old. What did you do after they told you that? Under state laws in all 50 states, I'm pretty sure, teachers are mandatory reporters of child abuse. So the only legal answer is I called the police and/or social services. I had a student who had just moved to our school. 3rd grader. His first day he had this huge gash over his nose. I don't know why, but I just didn't think much of it. A couple days later I asked him what had happened, and he said that his mom's boyfriend's dad pinned him against a wall and whipped him with his belt. Then showed me marks on his back as well. He kind of laughed it off and said, "Yeah, has mean." It took every ounce of me not to cry right then and there. I immediately went next door to get an adult to take over my class and ran to the principal. She called the police and they had some kind of excuse why they wouldn't be able to come right away. She demanded they be there today because she was not sending that boy home. They did show up. They walked him home and they watched as the boyfriend's dad packed up and left. The boy was in 3rd grade, had the dirtiest mouth, and was probably one of the funniest and sweetest kids I'd ever met. He did tell me that the man moved back to Samoa later that year. Mom stayed with boyfriend so knew stuff about the man. He moved schools the next year though, so I don't know how he's doing now. It wasn't a student, but his father. A guy came up to me on parents' night and told me to call him if his kid needed a good yelling, since his kid was such a useless duck up. While I stood there in shock, he added, "He's always been lazy, but he's been worse since his roommate at his last school killed himself. Don't hesitate to call me if he pulls that bullshit. Apostrophe. Fuck that guy. For real. What a dick. I'm hoping the kid is doing well now. Call me if the dad needs a good yelling, since he's such a useless duck up." I once had a piano student who said he couldn't practice at home because his stepfather would beat him to have to listen to it. Leaving aside the child abuse, why would you pay for piano lessons if you aren't even going to let your kid practice? No one knows where my mom and dad are, or if they are even alive. Logan. A kid in a class I subbed for who was being raised by his grandmother. Weirdly enough, I live next to a kid named Logan who has parents that abandoned him. Maybe only absent parents like the name Logan, or it's a very small world. A 6-year-old barely getting out the words "my mama choked me" between tears. A 2nd grader having a full meltdown about his low grade, saying his dad was going to make him sleep outside again if he found out. These are some of the things that keep us up at night. Heartbreaking. During a class field trip, a girl in class casually mentioned before everybody that the road we were driving down was the same one she tried to kill herself on the year before because she was bullied so badly. She said she'd been driving and floored it, hoping to hit a tree, only to change her mind because she didn't want to hurt her family. It just came out of nowhere and from the girl, who was generally considered incredibly popular, kind, and well liked. We saw our neighbor die last night. Completely deadpan. Me. Oh my goodness. What happened? Are you okay? He was racing his lawnmower and it dragged him to death. It went really fast. Me. Are you okay? Would you like to talk to the counselor? No. We are fine. We've seen it before. THEM equals 27th grade boys in the Ozarks of the Southern Midwest, USA. Had an international college student write a paper about his family, and a big part of it was talking about how he was jealous of his cousin's dog, so he drowned it in the ocean in front of said cousin. When I asked him why, he said he wanted the dog, and if it wasn't his, it didn't deserve to live. I gave the paper to my bosses, and he ultimately got deported for a bunch of violations and red flags. Runners up are a girl explaining she decided to go to college after her best friend was murdered in front of her during a gang turf war, and another girl who tried to explain to the class why torture porn movies like Megan is Missing are the best movies ever. Both of these two were in the same remedial class. Man, we had a public speaking class with the best student present at the end of the year, and his story was about coming to college after his brother was killed in gang shit. Pretty sobering for freshman year me, first semester in. This one student once told me, unprompted, I like red cars because that's the color of car my mom used when she left us to do drugs. What do you even say to that? That's rough, buddy. Second grade teacher here. A student recently told me his parents have a vibrating bed. I had to hold back laughing. Okay, but even sex aside, a vibrating bed sounds cozy AF. I have one. It gets old fast. Visitors like it though. I had a student, under 10, tell me he wanted to cut my head off and watch me bleed. I had the audacity to tell him that he needed to put his crayons up before he could get his Play-Doh out. Close bracket. A student once told me he was going to burn his house down. We talked about how that would ruin his house and how he could possibly hurt his mom and dad or himself. His reply was, Ed, make sure my mom was dead before I burn it down. This kid is 8. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes. I work as a special education teacher, specifically with students who are emotionally disturbed or have other disorders that impact their behavior. This isn't even the most ducked up thing I've heard. Just one of the most memorable. Also, for those of you wondering about the possibility of abuse, I truly do not believe he is being abused. He has been my student for several years and it's not uncommon for him to make disturbing statements. In fact, if I had $1 for every time he told me he was going to poison or stab someone, I would almost have enough money to fully fund my classroom. Makes you wonder if anything was going on in the home, or if the kid just had a violent streak. I had a senior student describe to a friend in class how she was going to duck her boyfriend that night. The boyfriend is also a student at school. It got disturbing when she asked me for my opinion. In this situation, a female teacher would be creeped out. A male teacher would be creeped the duck out. D. 6th grade. Came to school with a bruised face and told me he got pistol whipped and his dad got murdered the week before. This kiddo cried in my arms. I let him sit in my class with his head down all day. He missed school for a bit a couple weeks later and I was worried sick. His girlfriend told me he was in juvie for weed. It kept happening, but substances got harder. I think about that baby all the time. By 7th grade he was too hard to open up to me and we didn't keep in touch. I think about him and his girlfriend, another favorite student, constantly. Trying to convince a 17-year-old student that drugs are not the way to go and that he has a full life ahead of him when he says, doesn't matter, him gonna be dead or in jail by the time I'm 25. He had been told he was nothing his whole life and he absolutely believed it. Spent up until he graduated trying to prove him wrong. Edit. Oh goodness. Thank you kind redditors for the awards. Unfortunately, I have since left teaching at that school and don't have a way to contact him. Last we talked, he was thinking of trade school. A. Kindergarten. Student drew a picture of himself floating in outer space smiling and pointing at a giant red button on his spacesuit. I asked what the button was for. He said, it's so I can suicide myself, so I can be with Jesus. His completely embarrassed mother responded to my concerned email explaining that this portrait was likely the fruit of 2 separate conversations she'd had with him that week. The first explaining suicide bombers. The second explaining that his recently deceased grandfather was in a better place with Jesus. Kids are wild. I had a student who was sweet and innocent to adults. However, when alone with other kids he would curse at them and manipulate them to do his bidding. When the other students would complain, the student would act innocent and deflect anything that was said to him. I couldn't prove anything. When I expressed my concerns to mom played the victim. One day, however, I introduced Flipgrid, a video recording service for assignments, to which the student went on video and started spewing racial slurs to another student. On video, this boy exposed himself. I sent the video to our principal. Mom gets called in to have a conference. Mom plays the victim again about his behavior. The student gets transferred shortly after. Well, I can guess where he gets it from. Last weekend I sent positive emails to the families of all of my students. Because remote learning is hard and the kids are really stepping up. On Tuesday, when I saw one of my classes for the first time since sending the messages, a girl said to me, "That email you sent made my dad happy. He doesn't like me that much, and it made him like me." My heart broke for that poor girl. She's bright, friendly, and hardworking. I asked her, privately, if she was safe at home, and if there was anything I could do to help. She told me her dad liked her brother much better. We used to have some big behavioral issues at my school, elementary, and when I would sub for coworkers. Literally the only motivator these kids needed was I want to text mom/dad how proud of you they should be. My student recently told a story about how her dog died. She said she was staying with her aunt for a few weeks over the summer and her dog was home with her mom. When the student returned home, she asked for the dog. Mom said she didn't know where the dog was and told the student to look upstairs. The student found the dog dead in an unused bedroom. Mom's reaction was, "Oh, I guess I forgot to feed him." Student now lives with the aunt full time because mom often forgot to feed the kid too. I had a kiddo ask if she could have some of my Vegas, hummus, pretzels at a Saturday event. I thought she might have a carrot or something, but she ate it all and extremely quickly. I asked her if she forgot to eat breakfast that day and she told me they have cereal, but she is only allowed to eat it on school days. They have to miss breakfast on the weekends to make their food last. My mum's a teacher and she says there was a student that used to make these little paper drug packets and he didn't even know what they were. She says that the mother was a drug dealer and would make him make them all day long if he wasn't in school. Safe to say the police were involved after certain things happened, like her never turning up to the school to collect him one night and other stuff. Pretty weird how a child was making lethal drug packets and had no idea. He was just proud of them because that was the only thing he was taught how to do at home. That makes me very sad. Poor kid. Someone get him a PS5. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.